Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pop Culture SquadCast Live with Bob Harrison and Mike Gold. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Bob. How you doing?
I am good. I am recovering, mostly rested and mostly recovered from Terrificon this weekend.
And what was the previous weekend?
I wasn't anywhere the previous weekend. The previous weekend was San Diego. We weren't there. Next year.
Okay.
We'll see.
And the weekend before that?
I had like 2 or 3 weekends in a row where I was not doing anything. But
Really?
now I got this. I had this weekend, and then there's some other stuff, but no more cons until Baltimore when we're together,
Yeah,
which is shaping up nicely. I've been working with the
it
people
really
there.
is. I have gotten so many requests for, lunches and meetings and stuff. Uh,
Sure.
Wait till they find out. I'm not doing any work.
Well,
We'll see.
do you know? Do you? Did, I don't think I told you this. Do you know what's happening on Saturday night at Baltimore Comic Con? On Saturday night at Baltimore Comic
You
Con,
want to give me a clue?
well, there's a big thing going to be happening outside the con. Um, uh, Bruce Springsteen is playing at Camden Yards that night,
Oh,
so we can go outside and maybe hear a bar or two.
there's a couple of comics fans in that group.
Well, I was speaking to Ron Mars, and he is definitely going to be at that show.
Really? It's about the time I ate
Yes,
Korean chicken wings
this
with
is a great story.
Bruce
Okay,
Springsteen.
everyone, settle in because we're going to get a great Mike Gold story here. This is a fantastic. I want you to go from beginning to end. This is perfect Mike Gold, schmoozing time for everyone out there. This is what we're going to get now. So go ahead.
Well, it's about Amy Cho. Actually, that's where it starts. Because one day we were just talking, probably at some convention, and she'd asked me if I, had Korean chicken wings. Not that she had like a box of them, Just it just came up. We were talking about food, and I said no, I don't think so. And she said, well, you'd really like them. They're very spicy. Blah blah blah. Okay. Within a couple of weeks or maybe a month, I was at this benefit with Martha Thomas's, and it was for a cancer cause, and um, Dave Marsh, who's a friend of Springsteen's, and his wife is co-manager and all that. Um, their daughter died of cancer, and the entire music industry came together to do an annual fundraiser for cancer, and that, or actually against cancer. And that's great. And more often than not, Bruce was actually there. If he was in town, not performing, he would be at that benefit performing for about 100 people, which is a wonderful thing. But even if he wasn't performing, he would take a walk around the room and say hello to everybody. It was great, surrounded by bodyguards that make the Hulk look puny. And always wanted to say that. And I'm sitting here at this table, one or two other people are there, and I got this couple of these Korean chicken wings, and they're fabulous because there's like 100 different stations there, and each one's done by another great cook, and this was a Korean chicken thing, and I was going nuts because it was fabulous, some of the best chicken I ever had in my life. And Bruce comes up and goes like, um, "What's that?" So I told him what it is. And he says, do you mind? And I was quickly thinking, no, I'm going to be the only person here who turns Bruce Springsteen down. But
Right.
no,
Sure.
no,
Of course.
fine. And he ate it and he said, oh, this is great. And he just turns to one of his bodyguards. And the bodyguard runs out and finds the food station where the chicken was. And he comes back with a plate like you wouldn't believe. I didn't know they had that much chicken. And he goes down, and for 20 minutes, Bruce Springsteen and I, and anybody else at the table, we were eating Korean chicken wings and loving it and talking. So I say to Bruce, now I've met him a few times before at that benefit and other places, and I said, "Hey, I hear you're playing Wrigley Field." And he
Mhm.
looked. I knew what a baseball fan he was, and I'm a North Side Chicago boy, so I grew up in and around Wrigley Field.
Mhm.
It's my mecca, and he just looked all misty-eyed and said, "Yeah, I can't believe it. I'm going to be performing at Wrigley Field." And it was fabulous. I mean, it was the most human moment I'd had with a musician in years. And the chicken was great, and it's all Amy's fault. She knows that. She's probably a little tired of hearing it, but
Listen,
I'm still a fan of Springsteen and the
mhm.
chicken and Amy.
Well, that's great. Well, like I said, at Baltimore Comic Con, we can open the windows and maybe hear him. Maybe he'll play something from Greetings at Asbury, which is my favorite album.
I like the idea of opening the windows. I'm there. I'm there for that. I'm there for that. Now, Baltimore's a fun show, and due to your hard work and that of many others, um, we're doing what I think is going to be my final tribute to First Comics. Not that I'm never going to talk about it again, but we're doing a 40th anniversary panel with most all of the original First Comics crew. Um, Not John Ostrander and Timothy Truman. Both are a bit under the weather, but all these other folks, and
We're hoping
Grell
that
and
that
Jacob
changes sooner
and
or later.
Wheatley and Hempel. I'm sorry.
So we're hoping that changes sooner rather than later, for the better.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Jeez, absolutely. Uh, my God. I mean, John's one of my oldest friends. We go back to 71.
I wasn't even born then.
I know. But you didn't have the mustache either.
I didn't. The mustache did well at Terrificon this weekend. It did.
Are you familiar with, oh, geez, I think his name is Iski, who was the mascot for Esquire magazine back in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe 70s.
No. I did
Just like
have
you.
I had John Suntress say I looked like the strongman guy.
Oh, yeah, you do. John's right.
My kids
And
have
of
said I
course, when it
speak
comes
for
to
the trees.
strongmen, he knows his stuff.
Well, he does. He absolutely does.
This unbelievable boxing fan.
We did have a discussion about the John and I did have a discussion, which is one of the great parts about going to cons is running into friends. It was really great because there's so many times I tried to grab a moment to kind of for myself, and there was somebody else there, some friend of ours who we've met over the years and just talk about things. I ran into and I hope to run into him again because I didn't get enough information, but I ran into Philip Kennedy Johnson's super fan, which is super fun at the show. He has not met Philip yet and was very looking forward to the time when he could. He has a whole wall of Action Comics art behind him that he is a big fan of his, and I did let Philip know about that. But when I was talking to John, I did let him know about our last week's episode on our show where we talked to Tom Zoller and what Tom deemed the most offensive scene in all of Star Trek history. And I just said those words to John, and he said, "The vegan thing, right?"
Oh my God. That's insane. It is perfectly covered in the story. Perfectly covered. Those inhibition blockers that the Vulcans have were decommissioned for Spock at that moment in time. They didn't work.
But I don't want to get to it. Well,
you don't want to talk religion, huh?
Well, that may have a lot to do with it, but we'll talk about that another time. We're gonna get. I just want to give everybody a primer of what's coming up tonight. We're going to have two guests tonight. First, we're gonna have Willow Wilson, comic book writer and novelist and essayist. We're gonna have her for a little bit and talk about some amazing stuff that she's doing and has done.
And a bit of a freedom fighter too.
She's amazing. She's an amazing person. You're gonna have to hold me back because I am super excited for this. I look at all of the upcoming comics, and whenever I see her name on something, I get excited.
Right.
Been a fan of hers since Air, which is her first real ongoing comic, I think, pretty much, which was a Vertigo book. I'm very excited for this. I know I'm not going to get everything out, so we're going to look forward to that. And then we have our returning guest, Dean Haspiel, is going to be here tonight, which we're very excited for. Dino's got a new Kickstarter going on, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about that because he's starting to push the envelope here on what he's doing in his creator-owned stuff. So
that's all he does. He just pushes envelopes. If he were at an envelope factory, they'd throw him out.
Because
that's what he does.
He'd just be pushing them.
And he's our returning champion.
Sure. Well, it's funny. As much as he's come on, and we love having Dean on. Dean's so much fun to talk to, and I hope everybody hangs around and has a good time with it. But ironically, and not intentionally, but purely through natural chaos, I have interviewed him publicly more than anybody else in my short career that I've had here. But because he's always got something good to talk about, and it's always fun to get him on and talk. So, and
if he runs out of comic stuff to talk about, which has never happened, his own history and life is even more fascinating.
That is true. That is true. Last time I saw him, we went down a little bit of that, he's a very interesting person.
I once just guessed that when he was a kid growing up, he knew Nehemiah Persoff, and he says, "Yes, we used to go to ball games or something."
I'm sure. Listen, I had to ask him the last time, and maybe we'll get it. Maybe we'll get him to talk about it this time. But I had to ask him, how does it happen that this guy that I know, who slinging comics left and right, is Shelley Winter's godson?
Right.
And he told me the whole story, so maybe he'll tell everybody the story because it's a fun story. But of
course he'd be Shelley Winter's godson.
What?
Of course he'd be Shelley Winter's godson.
Well, I never thought I would meet Shelley Winter's godson, but I have.
It wasn't on your bucket list.
It wasn't something that I thought ever would happen. All right, I want to just change the topic for a second here. I'm going to bring something in because I think we need to say something. We do talk about pop culture and things in the news, and it's been somewhat of a sad news week for Gen X especially, and I want to pay our respects to Paul Rubens and everyone's favorite Pee Wee Herman. It's very sad that he's passed. We didn't suffer. He didn't suffer in public, but I know a lot of people are very very hurt by the loss. You said you had met him once?
Yeah, he was a remarkable entertainer. As a normal human being, he was pretty much a normal human being. Which is very gratifying, quite frankly, because those who aren't are a pain in the ass. He was not a pain in the ass, but I'd only met him briefly at, a party. It was,
It
was before all the problems with, the movie.
Sure. And just, from all accounts I've heard, just a wonderful person, despite his fact that he's a human being. Right.
He was perfect as the Penguin's father.
He was perfect. The Penguin's father. His turn as a vampire in Buffy the Vampire Slayer has also, been brought up recently about how much people enjoyed that as well. I mean, he was a fine actor and an entertainer, and I think the world will miss him. And again, so we want to take a second for that. It's interesting that that the other person who was lost over the past week is someone who I think you would have had a lot of respect for as a person, and that was Sinead O'Connor.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I still have respect for her.
Sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That she's one of the most courageous performers of the century, of the last century. Period.
Absolutely.
And she stood up for what she believed in. She did so very dramatically. Was one of the very few people of that decade to actually get completely and totally banned by NBC. And as far as I'm concerned, it was worth it. She really pushed the issue, and as is her right.
Yes.
As is her
Absolutely.
right. So yeah, I'm very saddened by that.
I am very saddened. I know that she had so much difficulty in life, and she had lost her son, I think, last year or so.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was very, very painful for her. One of the interesting stories about Sinead's the backlash from her very public action was, I believe it was about a week or so later, or not too much longer. There was a Bob Dylan benefit,
Mm-hmm.
and she was getting booed off stage because everyone had seen what had happened. And Chris Christopherson,
yes,
made her encouraged her as strongly as possible for her to go back out and to tell them, to show them that they couldn't beat her. And he was incredibly moved by her courage as well.
Did a song about her.
He did.
He did. Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have to talk about? We had some other things coming up before we get to our guest, and we can always do other things. But
what is your shirt?
My shirt,
little wings. Yeah.
My shirt is it's Jan Dersema.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's a skull bat. See, here,
It doesn't really look like that. It's not Jan.
She drew it.
Oh, it's her work.
It's a skull bat from Hexer Dusk, which she did with John. Right.
Yeah, I know. I consulted on the.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
A little bit, just a little.
So I'm super excited because our guest has just shown up in the green room, and I'm very, very excited. But before we get to that, I just wanted to touch really quickly on, I know your experience with labor and supporting labor in certain ways, and the strike continues on with no signs of anything going, and there's tons of people having opinions and whatnot, and there was a lot of questions about how people would show up at conventions, celebrities, and we were at Terrificon this past weekend, and the feeling that I got, I didn't talk to any celebrities about it. I did happen to get a selfie with Jerry O'Connell, which was completely random. But the theory is that if people are doing conventions and doing things that are based on their celebrity, that's not breaking any strike rules.
Right. If you're promoting something.
Well, they're not explicitly promoting anything. They're just
right.
They're like, so there was a conversation. I think I talked to someone who was at San Diego,
Mhm.
and JMS was there, and he was there. He couldn't talk about the fact that they're re-releasing a new. They could talk about animation, but they can't talk about film, right? So
It's a separate union.
There's a new Babylon 5 animated film or something that's coming out. So he could talk about that, but he can't talk about the Babylon 5 Blu-ray release that's coming out in a week or two.
Yeah.
So it's this weird thing that people are playing. You know, it's hard. I support every moment of it, and there's been a bit of a brouhaha in the interwebs over the past couple of days about someone not saying that they didn't support striking in general, which I find to be
asinine.
I find it to be ignorant.
Give that person a hot dog, and when they bite into it, ask them if they tasted the thumb. Because the fact that they don't is because of unions. It's hard, but look at the sacrifices the writers and the actors are making. Now look at the sacrifices the studio heads are making. They're still on payroll. They're still on salary. They're still making more money in a day than most actors in the Screen Actors Guild make in a year. Now, I have to be a little transparent here. In the past, because I'm a really old bastard, I've been a member of both AFTRA, before it merged with the Screen Actors Guild, and the Writers Guild. So, I guess I got blood in the game. But those executives think that they can wait out the actors and the writers because actors and writers traditionally are starving. And that's just not limited to movies and television, but you can take what you will off of that. They're used to it. They've planned for this. And they're still hurting because they're not getting the money. And the work has stopped. So everything is stopped in their lives except for the strike. And this union, the studio heads think they can outweight them. No, they can't. Without these guys, they've got nothing, and they're in a snit because they want to give them less money and own all of their artificial intelligence rights. You go in there, you make up your little thing, and all of a sudden, it's American flag, and you're out of a job.
Yeah, that would not be good.
No,
I don't care how you do it. There's no I don't think you can make American flag into a film media. But
actually, we've talked about this a lot. Not that anybody can make that happen tomorrow, but I think it could be done beautifully in animation.
Oh man.
I think it can be done.
Now I just got excited, but that's never going to happen either. But still,
it might. It might. At the Baltimore Con in a month and a few days, you too can ask Howard Chaykin.
I will. I don't know. See, I have to be very careful with the things I ask Howard because I want him to continue to let me ask him questions.
Howard is one of the nicest guys I know.
I understand.
But like most people I know, including me, once provoked, you're on your own.
All right. I want to take advantage of every moment we have here. And we've already taken too much. I want to bring in our guest. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in, well, she doesn't know, but there's going to be a little video, and then we'll bring in our guest, G. Willow Wilson. Hi, Willow. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Thank you for having me. That was a great little intro video.
Thank you.
It is wonderful to meet you. I don't think you and I have ever met. I could be wrong.
Think so either. If we did, it was briefly. There's a lot of people who I meet sort of like in passing at conventions then there's a sort of a sense of deja vu. It's like, I know I've seen you before, but I can't remember exactly where.
Right, right. And for the last 55 years, my life has been one long, unending convention.
You must be tired.
Oh, God, yes. Don't I look it? But I have to say, I love your work. I truly love your work, and I'm a little bit behind in my reading. So when Bob said, "Well, this is where we're going to go this week," I said, great, cool. What should I read that I might not have?" And he said, "Well, have you read the Poison Ivy series?" "Not yet, because I'm expecting the cartoon." And that's not true. But so I read the trade paper, the first 6 issues, and loved every minute of it. I had plotted out my time so that I'd be reading it in like sort of 2-issue segments. I don't like blitzing through books because I think you're doing the writer a disadvantage by reading it all at once. It wasn't meant that way. Didn't matter. I read yours all the way through.
Well, thank you. I hope it stood up to the high expectations. Poison Ivy is one of those characters that people tend to have strong feelings about. So,
well, she's a tricky character.
She's very tricky.
It takes a good writer who does her research and really thinks about what makes this character work. Now, you should do that with everybody, but the trickier the character, and you pulled magnificently.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear. I know the whole team loves that book. We all are very simpatico. It's it's rare when you get a whole group of creative people who just like to jam with each other and are all on the same page, especially when that page is some, fungal body horror, craziness. So, it really is delightful to be able to work with this group of people month after month on a character that we all love so much.
I think fungal body horror should be a category in the Overstreet Guide.
That's right. We're all terrified. It's like we can all sense the next plague.
Well, sure. I live in Connecticut, and not far from the shore, down in Greenwich, which is about 20 miles south of me, they just discovered these little microbes that eat into your skin and then die, and they itch like a son of a bitch for 7 days. So, the story broke right when I was reading the trade paperback.
You immediately start itching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Nature is trying to kill us.
No, nature is trying to defend herself.
Nature is trying to defend herself. Yes, that is what Poison Ivy would say. She'd say, no.
That's right.
Nature is trying to maintain the balance.
The Earth is going to be fine. Eventually, the Earth is going to be fine. Humanity, not so much. And we deserve it.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the central questions of the book is, do we deserve it? And how do we think about that? And, are some people more culpable than others? And if so, how are they held responsible without punishing the people whose only crime was sort of being born in a really hot century? So
that's right.
I'm sort of overselling the intellectual bits of this book. There's plenty of, just fun lesbian body horror.
Yeah,
so that's a jam. That's the one thing about comics. You kind of cut things up really small into tasty packages, and you put it all together so that if you want sort of intellectual questions, you got those, and if you're just kind of there for a good time and beautiful art, you have that too. So that's kind of what
if there's ever a comics character who deserves to voice her point of view, I'm not saying comics creator, because we do that all the time, but a comics character who does, particularly at this moment in time, it is Poison Ivy. And that's a challenge that your whole team rose to. And, okay, I've been a political activist actively since I was 15, and I'm about 99 now, and or so. So of course I'm going to like that, but God, he did it well, and it could not have come at a better time. Yesterday was the first day in July. It was also the last day in July, but it was the first day in the month of July where it wasn't over 110 degrees in Phoenix. 30 days, it was 110 degrees or higher in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah,
There's no global warming? Come on.
Yeah, I spent 3 weeks in Egypt. We just got back a few days ago, where yeah, it was 110 the whole time. And even there, which is historically a hot climate, people were saying this is like nothing we've ever seen. The heat waves are more intense, they last longer, they're more unpredictable, they come at times of the year they didn't usually come at before. So yeah, we are cooking. The frog is boiling. The frog is now boiling.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
My boss, Jeanette Kahn, back in the day, went to Egypt.
The legend.
And she came back and she just couldn't stop babbling about how great it was, and I believed every word. Never made it out to Egypt. Not the easiest thing to do. How did you enjoy your trip?
I used to live there, so for me, it's kind
It's
of a
homecoming.
return. Yeah. Well, not in a sense. Yes, absolutely. My kids were able to meet their cousins for the first time. My husband is Egyptian, so it was great. Got to see family. We should have gone in the winter. This was a recurring theme. So if you want to go in the winter, it was just easier with summer vacation and various job things to just kind of go in the summer. But boy, yes, we had a front row seat to what continuous, unrelenting heat is like.
Out
But
in
it's
the
an amazing
desert, go
place,
figure.
even at 110 degrees.
Well, I grew up in the other city that has a reverse flow of their great river. The Chicago River flows backwards like the Nile. But in Chicago, we engineered it in the very late 1800s, so that all of the garbage from the stockyards would not wash out into Lake Michigan, which is a freshwater lake. It went down to the Mississippi to really screw up St. Louis.
Well,
Things that seemed like a good idea at the
time. Yeah. Mike has been stealing my thunder like left and right here, so I'm gonna jump in.
I'm backing off because I know you have an agenda here, Bob.
I have a bunch of things. One of the things that well, again, Mike and I saw each other on Thursday when I was on my way up to Terrificon, and I had said, he said, what should I make sure that I read? And I told him that about Poison Ivy, and I'm glad he got a chance to read it. I've been a fan of yours since Air. As soon as I see your name on a book, I am very excited to read it. So thank you so much for doing this. I'm freaking out right now, just so you know. But and Invisible Kingdom is probably my favorite thing you've ever written. I love Invisible Kingdom so much.
That's awesome. I wish more people in the English speaking world were of that opinion. It did really, really well in Europe, which was interesting.
Interesting.
It was a sélection officielle at Angoulême. That's my very fancy French accent. At Angoulême, which was very exciting. So yeah, but it was really interesting to see that kind of split, that it seemed to be very popular there, and people liked it here. I think we won. Did we win an Eisner? We did. Oh my God. I'm looking over at my awards show.
Good. Lots of awards. We won them all.
Yeah, that
I told my local comic shop that guy that you were going to be on, and I said I'm going to ask her when we're getting more Invisible Kingdom. He said, do that. So
awesome.
So it's not just me. I want to touch a little bit on Poison Ivy because we talked about it, and I want to let you know that I am, and anyone who knows me, I am not a fan of the anti-hero. I am not a fan of the villain comic. I don't like to see Joker comics. I don't like don't really care for Harley comics. And you know, Venom is love Venom, let me tell you. But Poison Ivy is at the top of my read pile every time. I am absolutely loving the story that you're telling about this woman and her struggles and her determination and her need for justice in the way that she has to see it. I just love it. But I want to touch on one other thing that we talked about already, and that was you're living in Cairo. Before we get to new stuff, which I really want to do, living in Cairo at the time that you did, before you were really published a professional writer, how do you think that affected your career as a writer?
You know, it's hard to say. It was very difficult to break into the American comics industry from like 5,000 miles away. So, you know, it certainly added an additional layer of challenge to what is already a difficult, as anybody will tell you, industry to break into. You know, but I was quite young. I moved there when I was 20, and lived there until I was 25. And you know, when you're that young, you don't mind so much a pile up of challenges.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
like, you're gonna have a pile up of challenges. That's the time to do it. You know, I think it influenced my perspective in some very concrete ways that going back has helped me to realize, like, it's in fact, you know, I was joking around, you know, with some friends in Cairo, and I was like, oh my God, this is where this comes from. You know, I think it had an impact on the way that I tell jokes, which is obviously a crucial thing in comic, you know, in comic book writing, whether you're telling a serious story or a funny story, because timing is so critical in the medium.
That's right.
And I, you know, like I've come to appreciate how being on a diet of Egyptian media, which has a very specific sense of humor and very unique and funny and dry and kind of recursive, you know, like you start a joke and then you kind of bring it over here and then you bring it back over here. You know, I'm only really just now appreciating how much of an impact that had on kind of the way that I tell certain stories. So yeah, the impact is certainly there. Although it was, you know, it was very weird. I can remember the first conversation I had with Joan Hilty at DC. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the future. I'm like literally 10 hours ahead of people in the US. And, you know, the very first comics that I was working on, that was nice because I had an extra day functionally on deadlines, you know, because, you know, I would start working and I'd be like, oh man, I have, you know, like I have a whole extra work day to get this done because my editor's not even going to be in the office for another 10 hours. So that eventually, you know, came in handy for sure.
Yeah, really. I hired John Ostrander when we started up First Comics, not just because he was a good writer; he was a writer for the stage, but because he was a writer for the stage, and I thought he would know, you know, knowing how to block. He was also an actor, so knowing how to block and how to get people around, but knowing timing is critical in dialogue. And it's critical in life as far as I'm concerned, but I've had a weird life. I took improv classes when I first got on radio when I was 20. And that and the crisis intervention training I've had are probably the two most important things I've ever done for myself. Understanding that timing. You do a masterful job, and so far, you're the only writer I know who has said that, who has talked about learning and comparing timing styles. And you and I could talk about this forever and probably bore millions and millions of people. People will tune in just to be bored by it.
I'm sure there's a market for it.
Yeah, really. But eventually, what you learned is what every writer in particular in comics learns. When some buddy who wants to write comics comes up to me and asks me how they do that. First thing I ask is, do you know how to spell perseverance? And I wait and see if they get the joke, or if they get the point, actually, because that's what it takes.
Yeah.
It takes massive perseverance, just like everything else in show business. So there.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. Yeah. Sometimes the perseverance is rewarded. Sometimes your reward is frustration, but it definitely helps.
Look, if you don't do it, you ain't gonna get it. It's just that simple.
Absolutely.
Mr. Harrison, I trod on your time again.
No, please. I'm so enjoying this. I do want to bring up, and I want to talk about this. Did I do it right? Let's see. Are we getting anything? I don't know. Maybe I'm not sharing it properly. Stop. Let's get it back.
Oh, these computers make your life so much easier, don't they?
No, shush you. You're not seeing it, huh? Is nobody seeing anything here? Oh, there it is.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about it. I read the first issue and I absolutely love it. I'm super excited. I saw that at San Diego somebody was cosplaying as characters.
Oh my god, an incredible cosplayer! And
it was so good.
Chris Wildgoose, my co-creator and the artist on the series, just found him on Instagram. I don't remember offhand what his handle is, but I will post it somewhere. Oh my gosh, I was thrilled. It was so incredible.
I've been a fan of his for a while. I love his work.
Did you design the cover? Not just the art, the whole cover, as we're looking at it right now.
Sorry, did Chris design the cover? Yes, Chris did the whole thing. Yeah, he designed it. He drew it. In fact, I think he colored it himself, if I'm not mistaken. This first cover.
I wouldn't be surprised because the color looks a little different than the inside.
Than the interiors. Yeah, I'm like 85% sure that he colored that himself as well.
And as I was preparing, and again right here. So I saw Simon was the letterer, and he did a great job as well.
I love Simon. Yeah, I was happy to be able to work with him again.
What do you want people to know about this story as it gets underway?
So, Hunger in the Dusk, I've been calling Hot Orc Saga as a sort of
Hot Orc Saga.
Hot Orc Saga.
Hashtag Hot Orc Saga, right?
Yeah, that's really all you need to know. It's a saga with hot orcs in it. So it was my sort of second quarantine baby. I had two kind of quarantine baby books. One was Poison Ivy, and one was this book. And I think even though they're very different books, they kind of come out of the same impulse, which is the world is coming to an end. So in The Hunger in the Dusk, that's it.
It's so pleasant. It's so happy. We're in happy times, right?
Happy times. So Hunger in the Dusk takes place in a shrinking world that is peopled by fantasy characters that you've met before. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just making a really satisfying set of wheels for you to ride around on, like a Maserati. Or I guess that's actually a really uncomfortable car. But so in this world, for reasons that are not quite clear at the beginning, inhabitable land is shrinking, desertification is happening. And so all of these various peoples have either disappeared or died off. And the only ones left are orc kind and humankind. And they are kind of battling it out for this last little scrap of habitable land that's left. And into this war between these two factions suddenly arrives a people of giants that had been thought lost. They kind of left in their ships to go try and find some other place to live centuries ago, and no one has heard from them since. And now they're back and they've changed, and not in good ways. And so the orc dynasties and the humans are sort of thrown together to try to defend themselves against this new, unexpected threat. And so you get kind of unlikely allies. You get a lot of politics, dynastic politics, big battle scenes, all kinds of, romance, betrayal, all of the good stuff.
Yeah, and I can feel all of that coming. That's the best part, because in the first issue, you really put that in there. That you well there was very it's hard to have a first issue that has enough that it feels like something's going, but you can feel the build happen, right? Like there was a very clear event that happened in that story in that first issue, but that event laid the seeds to all of those things you're talking about. I'm so excited. How long? Where are you envisioning this to go? Like, do you have a very simple?
I hate to tell people this. I hate to tell people this, but there's 2 generations of the story game down. So there's what happens to these characters who we meet in this first year, and then if people like it and read it and want more and buy a lot of issues, there's the children of these characters.
See, this is what I want to hear. These are the things I want to hear. This is what
literally, like this is a story that I was just tinkering with for absolutely no reason, while a lot of other projects were suspended during COVID. And I was like, I don't even know if there's a market for this. I don't know if anybody wants this. Because it's very much like stories that we've heard before, but it's kind of like a fantasy story that you know and love that's been mugged, held upside down, and shaken by its legs to see what falls out of its pockets. So there are twists on things that will be very familiar, that hopefully will be satisfying to people who read a lot of fantasy. And if you don't read a lot of fantasy, this is a great place to start. I think Chris Wildgoose and I discovered in situ that high fantasy is very difficult to pull off in a comic book format, in a monthly comic book format, because so much of high fantasy traditionally in novel form happens parenthetically. Like you can digress. You can be like, oh, and then, like 5,000 years ago, this thing happened. And, if you're J.R.R. Tolkien, you can be like, here's a chapter about, the history of elves. And here's this other thing. When you have a 22-page monthly comic book installment, you do not have room to be messing around like that. Even if, as IDW has very generously, you are given extra pages. So you really have to be incredibly efficient about how you work that parenthetical stuff in. Chris does a huge amount of heavy lifting by putting things in the background so that you sort of see visually some of this world, and you don't need to waste a lot of time being like once upon a time and giant narrative captions. And the pacing again of fantasy is very distinct and also very difficult to pull off in a 22-page format. So it's been wonderful to sort of, for me as a huge structure nerd, in case that wasn't obvious, to make those blocks fit in this particular Jenga pattern that they need to fit into to be released in a monthly comic book format, and make all the beats sort of fall where they should so that they're satisfying, and so that people are like, oh my God, I can't wait to find out what happens next, hopefully. So yeah, it's been wonderfully fun for me to write. Chris and I have been working on it for a very long time now. We've got a whole secret set of Pinterest boards that we put inspo for each other. So yeah, it's just a ton of fun. There's really nothing quite like it out, from mainstream comic book publishers right now. So if you're looking to scratch that fantasy itch, this is the book for you. And I hope you pick it up.
Bob, you put your finger on something that's really critical. I don't want to go any further without jumping on it.
Go ahead, do it.
There's a lot of comic books being published these days. Lots. Covering a wide variety of fields, which is wonderful. However, we still go to comic book stores to buy them. Sometimes we do it online. So that first issue is critical, because for X amount of your audience, it's one and done.
Yep.
If you don't grab them that first issue, and if you have a story that goes for generations, as yours does, how do you look at that first issue and say, how do I grab them and keep them forever?
Well, it remains to be seen if we've actually done that.
I want to jump in there for 1 second, because this is a little spoilery, and I'll try to keep it as least spoilery as possible. But as I'm reading that issue, after the first 5 pages, there was a massive change, and I'm like, what did she just do to me? Because I was getting excited, and then I had to get excited for different reasons. And what you did there was you opened up your arsenal and said, these are the knives, get ready to see them.
Yes. Yeah, place the gun.
Right.
Torturers do that. They open up their little set of instruments. Yeah.
I mean, it's this is only mildly spoilery, but it essentially begins with the attack on Lindisfarne with a twist. Like sort of the first Viking raid, but we think we know who it's going to be, and then it turns out to be something else. So you're absolutely right. And the first 5 pages are very much,
they're wonderful. I was so excited about the people that I was meeting.
It's there to tell you, a lot about kind of where you are. We had to kind of deliver a lot of information in a very brisk fashion, and most of it was visual. So, like there's a lot of choices that Chris is making, and a lot of things we talked about. Okay, who are we seeing? In what combination are we seeing them? What's critical? And then there's a twist that comes in, and you're like, oh, geez, oh no.
No, it is wonderful.
So yeah, it's I hope it works. I have to say, like, I usually, when I get done writing something, and the art comes in, we've been working on it at that point for a long time, and I kind of put it away, and I might not look at it again for quite a while, but this story is one that I keep coming back to and kind of rereading and been like, wow, this turned out really good. Oh, wow, this is really good. So, just sort of on a personal level, it's great to be able to work on a story like this. And it's amazing, frankly, that and wonderful that IDW took a chance on a story like this, because it's hard to pitch epic fantasy in this market. It's not an easy thing, and it's kind of a moonshot. So I'm really thrilled that the response has been as good as it has been. Like, I don't remember the last time I've seen first week cosplay for previously unknown characters. Actually, I do remember the last time I saw that was with Ms. Marvel. So if we can catch that kind of lightning in a bottle again, I will be very pleased. I will be very pleased.
Well, so what you're telling us is that COVID has been very good to you.
Well, I don't know that I would say that.
I don't think anybody could really say that.
It was really hell. I mean, I kind of had to. I have 2 children, and we live in Seattle, where the first outbreak in the United States started. So my kids were out of school earlier and longer than almost any other kids in the country. And functionally, because everybody tried their best, but online school, nobody'd done it before. There were a lot of kinks to work out. It really was no substitute, especially for young kids, for in-person learning. So I functionally had to kind of drop about half my job and homeschool my kids so that they could read and write. They were still in the reading and writing era. They were not of an age where they could kind of, read books on their own and stuff. They were still learning the basics, basic math, basic reading. And those cannot be skipped. And I was like, okay, this is what it is now. So, it was an agonizing couple of years. But it's nice now to look back and being like, and say, oh, wow, it was unbelievably tough, and I would not do it again if you paid me good money. But out of that came all of this stuff, that people are now getting to read and have conversations about. So now it feels very fruitful. At the time, it was mildly hellish.
That's a lot like having a baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
But look at what you get at the end.
Look what you get at the end. It's so cute.
So before you have to run, and I hope we can get as much time. I hope we'll have you back again, because we're not getting to everything. I know that. I want to talk really quickly about the dreaming.
Yeah.
And Mike, did you read the? I know I mentioned it to you, and you gave me a knowing look. The Shakespeare thing that she did with the dreaming.
Yes. No.
Okay. That was as we're in the parking lot. I'm like, she wrote the dreaming thing with Shakespeare. She's like, aha. So, but it was very interesting, and it's funny because it's related to the conversation you and I kind of had over text this morning. Um, I and I called you. You said that you're okay with being called Willow, by people, and I kind of thought that was the case, and it was because of a conversation I had with Steve Orlando at FlameCon several years ago, and he said he had just gotten Wonder Woman, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I said, how did that happen? He said, well, Willow got a dream job that she couldn't turn down, but I didn't know what it was then.
It was a clever pun.
So it was a clever pun, and it's very Steve Orlando, and I just got the joke today.
Yes.
And I'm gonna have
I
to
love that man. That's very funny. Yeah, that's very Steve.
It's very Steve. It is very Steve. We're he's a good friend, and but anyway, I love that story. I love
Thank
Nick
you.
Robles.
He's so good. Oh my gosh.
He's amazing.
He's so
Ruin.
talented. It's ridiculous.
I feel they're not taking advantage of using Ruin.
One does what one must. It's always kind of a risk introducing new characters into a beloved franchise with characters that people are very
sure
attached to for generations. But yes, oh my gosh, yeah, I loved all of those characters. I literally dreamed about them. They inhabited my actual sleeping hours. And that's one book that I really do wish I'd been able to do another year on. But that one kind of got kneecapped by COVID. Because it was coming out in the middle of all the distribution changes, and the release date kept getting pushed back because shops were still closed. It was just an absolute mess. It was the worst possible climate for a book to be released in. And, I still feel mildly devastated about that because I'd been waiting to play in this universe since I was 14 years old. And then there's, a giant pandemic, and it's kind of like, well, here it is, there it goes. That was heartbreaking. But
how was the reaction? Ed, our good friend Ed, asked, what was the reaction from fans to your playing in that very specific realm of that very beloved story?
People did, those who were reading the book really seemed to like those characters and that specific combination of characters and personalities. Ruin is just such a wonderful concept, like a nightmare who doesn't want to be a nightmare who's scared of the dark and doesn't want to frighten people, and is kind of afraid of what he is. That was really, really fun to explore. Because we've got the really scary nightmares like the Corinthian, who you're like, they're scary, they like being scary, they're scary all the time, super scary. They lean into it. And so to get, almost an anti-hero who doesn't want to be a bad guy has been drafted into this,
that's why
thing that he doesn't want to be part of. Yeah. That was really fun. And he's got this little stutter, and he's so adorable, and he falls in love with somebody he's supposed to go frighten. Great character. And yeah, if they ever want me back, I will be back in a flash. But it's sad that book came out into such a global mess, a supply chain mess, a shop closure mess, just all kinds of messes.
I don't want to be cynical here, but get used to that.
Yeah. What, the pandemics? God, I hope not.
Well, it's funny.
Well, it depends on how you define pandemic.
Yeah.
Because it's like 135 in Death Valley.
There's this generic feeling that I've been having throughout this entire conversation, because you have this incredible ability to terrify me with reality. And the for example, Invisible Kingdom, where there's a real threat to those characters at all times. They are living under an existential threat at all times, and in so many other things, even as far back as Air, where the concept that the world that we live in, we are not guaranteed.
There's a fundamental instability.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it shows through in all of your work, whether it's Poison Ivy or whether even it's Wonder Woman and Ed agrees. So, but it's not the same every time. You find a different way to terrify us with reality. Even Hex and Hunger and Dusk has the same type of like. I started out, I'm like, okay, where are we going to go with this? And again, those first 5 pages, I'm like, okay, I can get into this. And then everything is pulled out from under me, and I'm like, okay, let me figure out what's going on here then. And at the end of the issue, I'm like, well, I need to know what happens. I need to know, and I need to know that they survive, right? Even though you don't write horror or you don't write necessarily mystery, the stories that you write are so very compelling.
Thank you. No, that's a really, really interesting observation that I'm not sure I've heard put in quite that way before. And it was interesting when you were saying this. I was thinking about earlier in our conversation, you were asking, like, how did living in Cairo kind of influence the start of my career? And I will tell you that one of the most vivid things that stuck with me forever, and I think is in the bedrock of everything that I've written since, is coming from Egypt to here and thinking, okay, I'm coming back to the US, and certain things are going to be more reliable. Like it's when you're living in a functionally a dictatorship, certain things just don't work. And I came back and I was like, okay, now these things are going to work. I had a sense that I was on a rocking boat, and now, okay, I'm getting off the boat and I'm going back to shore. And then I moved back to the US and I was like, I'm still on the boat. It's still rocking. It's rocking back and forth, but nobody else notices. Like, do people not see that these fundamental instabilities are working their way into our society, and people just don't notice them? How are they not noticing this? And it's because, like everywhere, you kind of become immune to those forces in your own society. You're really good at noticing them in other people's societies and really bad at noticing them in your own until it's too late. But because I've been out of the country, I came back and I was like, why is nobody talking about this, like, fomenting political instability and like economic disparity and all of the things that cause in other parts of the world really terrible forms of extremism, civil wars, all kinds of bad things? Why aren't we talking about this? And
why is nobody upset about kidnapping of children in the United States of America? Now, you should be upset about it anywhere, but if you live here, it's your backyard. And all these kids were ripped apart from their families, and we just said, oh, geez, that sucks.
You know who is always looking at the world around them and saying, why aren't you paying attention? Kamala.
Yes, she does that a lot. It's like, nobody's talking about this. Why are we talking about this? Does anybody else see this? Okay. Yeah, actually, that's a very good observation.
I know you have to go. So, but really quick, why Jersey City? Was there editorial thing? First of all, I'm a Jersey boy.
No, so I'll tell you exactly why. I'll tell you exactly why. So there's a twofold reason. Number one, it is symbolically significant. The epicenter of the Marvel universe is New York. It's not like DC, where it's a fictional city kind of overlaid atop a real city in the form of Gotham / NYC. In Marvel, New York is a real place. The superheroes live at very specific parts of this city. and it's where the bulk of the action takes place. Of course, there are ancillary stories and other parts of the country and the world where important things take place, but the epicenter has always been New York. So what better place for a young, untested, emerging superhero to be located than right across the river in a state that people forget about and kind of consider the armpit of America, where you can see the superheroes. You can look across the river and they're so close, but they might as well be in another country. So, symbolically, it was perfect. Thing number 2 is Sana Amanat and I are both Jersey girls. We both grew up in central New Jersey, about 20 minutes apart from each other. So we were very familiar with the particular weird, strange, unique magic of America's armpit.
Sure.
And
Listen,
the strange,
born and raised in Jersey for 30 years, so don't worry about it.
Well, then yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is
The only thing wrong with New Jersey is I-95. If they got rid of I-95, Jersey would be fine.
Yeah, I mean that's the joke, right? You're from New Jersey, me too. What exit? So it's the classic,
Right.
the classic Jersey joke. So yeah, that it felt as soon as I was like, oh man, Jersey City, that it could be no other place. Like as soon as that was on the table, we were like, yep, that's it. That's got to be it.
That's awesome.
And it just worked. It just worked, and it was great.
Thank you so much for doing this. I
Absolutely,
appreciate
my
all the
pleasure.
time, and I do want to do it again. We'll figure out another time that works for us and you. And I would love to have you back. I have so many more questions. I'm a huge fan, as I said. We're very excited about The Hunger in the Dusk. We hope we get 60, 70, 80, 100 issues of it. We're very, very
From
excited.
your lips to,
Right. And and people should go out there and buy more Invisible Kingdom so we can get more of that, because let's go.
100%.
Didn't Larry Hama do like 320 issues of G.I. Joe?
Something like that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and he's still doing it. So
It's possible.
It's possible.
This would be the Hot Orc. What is it? Hot Orc.
Hot Orc Saga.
Hot Orc Saga. Perfect. Excellent. We're gonna have it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Willow. I appreciate
Thank you both for having me. It was a great
Thank
fun.
you for being here. We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your night.
All right, you too.
Bye.
That was fun.
My gosh, that was wonderful. Right. Now we're going to everybody stay tuned, because there's more coming. We're going to jump sides of the Hudson River, and then we're going to go over the East River to Brooklyn, and, and we're gonna bring in our good friend Dean Haspiel. So everybody's hang on one second, and we're gonna talk to Dino. This is the best part about this, is that I do these videos which bring people in, and I love to celebrate people's work. This is the first one that I already had something. I just had to modify it a little bit to bring in the new stuff, because the new stuff is pretty cool. So here we go. Hey,
can
wow!
you hear me?
And we can hear you great.
Okay.
You look about the same.
Oh,
What's
I
that?
got. Yeah, I was at the beach 2 days ago, and a week before San Diego Comic-Con, and then I was at San Diego Comic-Con in the California sun.
But you're not. Did you take advantage of being in the California sun? Most people are just like you're in buildings the whole time there.
Well, and in the air conditioned buildings a lot of the time, but then you go out at night, and it takes a while to become night.
Okay, sure.
And then also, I was in Hollywood on the bookends of the trip.
Good.
Hanging out with some friends, with Larry O'Neill,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, Larry O'Neill, Bob. You probably met Larry, and a couple other friends, and we did a lot of walking around LA.
Good.
And it was like pre-gaming the amount of walking I'd be doing in San Diego. So I don't have any legs right now.
It's been a week.
We can't see them,
Exactly.
so I'll assume they're not there.
They are not there. Thanks for that video you made. Hi,
Oh, no.
Sherry.
Well,
Are you drinking, Bob? Bob, are you drinking alcohol?
I'm always it's empty. Like I
heard clinking of whatever.
There's definitely there's a little bit of water and something left, but you know.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
So all right. The Kickstarter's up. The Kickstarter is published. We have Billy Dogma and Jane Legit in NSFW appearances. Right.
You know, listen, I have nothing against porn. I think porn's the best things on planet Earth, right? But I just want to say that we are now segueing from like a very, very wholesome person who created like Ms. Marvel into Dino, and we're gonna talk about some porn. So it's a balancing act. All right. Come on now.
Yes.
But no, but I was gonna say I don't really draw porn. I draw like at most rated R or a soft kind of porn, you know. In fact, I just finished drawing a story today that's about the most nude I've ever drawn, my Billy Dogma and Jane Legit characters. And it's still very safe. I mean, I think it's safe for work, but others, you know, their mileage may vary.
You know, the issue is people have nipples and they don't want to see them.
And they have penises and vulvas.
All kinds of stuff. What will they think of next?
Yes, right.
So listen, the you and I had this conversation a couple of months ago before the Kickstarter, and we were talking about how the platform that you're using very nice, very, very nice. The platform that you're using to sell this book and to get people to buy it allows for less restriction, and why not explore that? Right? Is that how you approach this?
I think what we talked about, and I've noticed now that I've done this is my second Kickstarter, but during the first Kickstarter, I realized it was a completely different ecosystem of comics. You know, there are, I guess, some restrictions on Kickstarter, or if there is, they might label it a certain way. You know, as one does. But I realized that, you know, I can really make what I want. You know. I'm not into hate crimes or producing any kind of hate, and I would be against that personally. But everyone has a different definition, I guess, for hate because there's so much of it online, you know. But I'm not put on this earth to, you know, perpetuate hate. I'd rather, you know, perpetuate hope and human connections, right? So that's kind of like the bedrock of a lot of my work is listen, Mike, you know this as well. Any superhero, even if I did horror or whatever, there's always a romance story somewhere in there. You know, it's about some sense of love. And as corny as that may sound, that's just how I roll, you know?
It's true. It is the bedrock of Dean Haspiel stories. There will always be there's a love story at the heart of it, always.
It's the love story. It's the personal interests that separate one story from another, particularly when you're involved so deeply in any one genre. You know, you mentioned superheroes. Okay, well, superheroes do superhero stuff. What makes them unique is who they are, not what they are.
Right. Exactly. And listen, I don't know if I could ever write and draw a proper romance comic, but there's romance in every comic I do to some capacity. And I'm sentimental, man. I cry probably every day because it feels good, you know? It's like laughing, just sadder, you know? But yeah, this Billy Dogma Kickstarter is very different from my COVID Cop Kickstarter, not only because of subject, but also I'm revisiting characters I created in 1995. You know,
that's perfect. I want to talk about that. First of all, the link to the Kickstarter is in the comments, so everybody can go ahead and just click on that if they want to, and back it. But that was one of the first things I had listed here. You know, I mentioned to Mike, I've interviewed you more than I've interviewed anybody else in my career. We've never really spent a lot of time talking about Billy Dogma and Jane. So
That's true. That's true because I'm taking a break.
What do these characters mean to you?
I used to describe Billy Dogma as Dean Haspiel to the second power, like a little 2 over the letter L in my name, right? And then I realized I was actually probably more like Jane Legit than I was Billy Dogma. Jane Legit is the real hero of the duo of these two love titans. But she also is a little more practical, although she can be more bombastic. And Billy, maybe Billy is the id to Jane's ego. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And also
she's the ego to his id.
Or exactly. And also, everyone, all relationships have issues, conflicts, and they have lots of conflict. But, at the end of the day, they fight for each other. And that, to me, in some ways, is the fantasy of their romance. Because most people break up. Most people ultimately leave each other. Or the ones that stick around, it gets even worse. It's just pure toxicity. But when they get toxic or they have a scuffle, it impacts their city, not just them, but the world around them, And I feel like I've been around people that the minute you get in a room with them, they have dictated the terms of that room by the way their energy is or the way their relationship functions. And I feel like I've been a perpetrator of that in past relationships, So I'm trying to step back. And I mean, listen, a lot of art is therapy, and I try to step back and I look at, what concerns me in relationships and with the idea of love. And that changes all the time. When you're a kid, it means one thing. When you get older, it's a whole other thing, And I'm trying to navigate that by revisiting these characters every so often, and they evolve. At least the way I portray them evolves. They don't even look the way I first drew them. I mean, they just, there's nothing too consistent about them except that they are my characters to play with, and to tell these stories and hopefully connect with other readers that can recognize something in themselves in those characters, as are the characters that I love to read and enjoy from afar.
It's funny.
So there.
It's funny because they have perfect Dean Haspiel names.
Yeah, right. That's almost where I began playing with words in some way, and the power of that. There's a certain power of that because you can connect pretty quickly, and they are what their names say. I
was going to say there's something about these characters that these are in some way the beginning of who you've become. Most cartoonists, or comic book creators, artists, writers, they're like, I'm going to write Superman, I'm going to write Batman, and you did that. That was, but then you kind of discover that there's something inside of you that wants to come out that, wasn't created by Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, Bob Kane, so there's something that's Dean, and this is the beginning of that. And there's been so much to follow, which I love, but there was something very, very raw about them. And I'm glad you're revisiting it.
Definitely raw, and I appreciate it. Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
It's like any other medium, like creating stories for any other medium. It's going to reflect you until you hit that committee level on television. But let's not talk about that. It's going to reflect you. Every writer artist has his or her own approach. Mm-hmm. They may not be aware of it, and they're probably not as aware of how that evolves, but it's going to evolve just as we as humans tend to evolve. So when I read your stuff, Dean, I get very worried about you.
Well, I thank you, and
It's
I can use your worry. I get worried too, but I also feel like they use the term authenticity these days, right?
Right.
And I like a lot of words, it gets abused, and I'm just trying to be honest, warts and all. That's how I put it. Honest, warts and all. Like there are things you may not like about my comic that I'm producing here because some might say, oh, it perpetuates the male gaze. But I'm also showing the female gaze too, in some stories, and I'm also putting myself out there. Mike, Bob, we grow up in public when you're an artist, so there are going to be things that I've drawn and said that I might cringe at later on and be like, oof. But there's a context to that. There's a reason for why we say and behave and do the things we do, and then we have like these internet police that try to, find a way to get you, with that stuff. But you have to put things in context. And this comic, this primer, I'll call it, this Billy Dogma, Jane Legit one shot that's basically an erotic comics noir, is going to have instances that are very young. It's more of a younger Dean Haspiel, but I want that in this book because it is honest, and I think people can still relate to those cringe moments, and you're like, oof, I remember when I used to look at a girl's ass like that, or whatever, and maybe you still do, and if you want to be honest, and those things are in the book,
yeah, but you try not to get caught.
Well, no, you still do, but you don't think about always doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a time, and I had this conversation with somebody recently, just kind of talking about getting older and stuff like that, and that you have this. We get to the point where getting laid is not the most important thing in the world. It's not that you don't want to turn it down or that you're not interested in it or that it's not something you want to do. But when you're young, it's the only thing that matters, right? So
this is going to sound really creepy, but I still have friends that are like, oh, I want to have sex with her. And that's fine. That's fair, right? But sometimes I'm like, I don't need to have sex with you to make love to you.
Well, there's that too.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, right. Well, the longer you stalk the earth, the more you realize the subtleties of life.
Exactly.
And that nuanced life, you create your own nuances if you're any good. You don't inherit it from others. We inherited our sex drives. I mean, it's in the DNA, but our whole society and the advertising and everything that we hear and see is all very sexually oriented. And after X number of years of it, you get the point. That doesn't mean you're no longer interested. It means you got the point.
Right. No, I getting older, as much as it hurts,
it's painful.
Is a true privilege, to be honest. I remember when I was younger, I sought the older people. I wanted their, quote, wisdom, even if they were full of shit. You could parse that. We're not dummies, right? But I love a tall tale.
Sure.
And I'll tell you this, I don't know if I'm working my way, but I would love to get to a Billy Dogma and Jane Legit story that was kind of tonally like The Old Man and the Sea, just like not all the subjects, but one clear dilemma, one clear moment, one piece of time,
Sure.
And just boil it all down, caramelize it, and I don't know what that is because I haven't gotten there, right? So for me, this is a personal project, and hopefully it's something that other people can relate to, obviously, and I am trying to communicate here with my work, and I'm putting it out there to be criticized and or enjoyed or whatever, and the same thing, COVID Cop, like I was told by all the publishers I sent it to, this is a fun idea that we can never publish this, right? And I think we discussed this in the last.
Sure.
Yeah, I still don't understand why they couldn't.
Well, gee willikers. I mean, it's got two words in the title people hate: COVID and cops. Right? And to me, that's also what sells it, right? Like, you got to be kidding me. All right, let's see what this is, you know?
For a couple of years of my life, I edited this book called Wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
You can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you,
As long as Jeanette's not looking.
as long as you're good at subterfuge.
Mike, I think we talked about this last time. I really wish you were editing an anthology series or something on a regular basis that I could contribute to. I would love
to do that. This is the only nation on Earth, with the arguable exception of Canada, where you can't do anthology comics.
Yeah, well, because they suffer. They don't sell for some reason. I don't understand it, because that's my favorite kind of comic.
See,
Mine too.
That's where you guys are wrong. Like there's a woman out there who, or there's a person out there who has made some tremendous living, and who's doing good work making anthology comics. And Spike, Spike Trotman's. She's they're doing it. They're finding the ways. They're moving around. I think.
And of the 42,000 comics published every month, how many in America? How many are anthology comics?
Oh no! Listen. Actually, DC and Marvel do it all the time with their red, white, and whatever, black, white, and gold.
Those are great. I love those. Are the ones I buy because I can't deal with continuity anymore. I'd rather read a 6-page story about Harley Quinn, in all red or all gold or black or white or blue, whatever.
I hate the monochromatic stuff about it, but I get your point.
You really?
I love that.
You hate monochromatic stuff?
No, I don't like the concept where they have to do it only in one. I love black and white. I love black and white, but I think that when someone says, okay, it all has to be red and black and white, so not everything is going to match that.
Well, you know why? Maybe, Bob, you're also reacting to the fact that half the time people don't use the color narratively.
So, you want to talk about something that's so Sirens of the City. Have you read that?
Mm-mm.
It's Kari's.
Kari, yeah, of course. Yes, I'm sorry. I was reading it in the Substack. I didn't get the comic book.
I got so first of all, that's the only Substack I pay for. It's the only one I will pay for because I love them. I support them at all times. I'm going to take this out, but I want to get back to this. But Kari and Joanne are doing amazing things. I'm so excited for both of them with everything that's going on with them.
Yeah, Kari was my studio mate for a few years.
I know, and I know you read it. So, but like the way that they've limited their palette in that book works very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's I didn't know if it would. I will tell you that it works even better in print than it did on the scroll or on the screen. But it's difficult to do that. I mean, but again,
as a graphic response, coming from an artist, I too like the limited palette, right? I've employed that a lot in my work.
Sure.
But really, it's more because I don't know how to color anything, so I'm just using
bullshit,
it. But thank you.
You're a very good colorist.
But having said that,
more than adequate.
But thank you. But having said that, I have an allergic reaction to memoir sometimes because it's sticking to the truth, right? And it's sticking to plausibility and chronology and everything else. And what I love about creating avatars like Billy Dom and Jane Legit is that I can feel that I can write something more emotionally true, and the reader, I feel, can connect easier to avatars or quote made up fictional characters versus watching Dean Haspiel go through a story, right? And with that in mind, I feel the same thing is true with color. Using a limited palette, you're not worried about the color anymore. You're not worried about whether that was supposed to be blue or brown or red or whatever the item was or the person or this or that, because you can do more emotional things with color and as well as a limited palette. Versus 4-color, where often you're trying to get the car right, the building right, the person right, and then after a while, I'm not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. Also, I respect really good coloring. So,
listen,
I had the privilege of working with two, pardon the phrase, old timers who knew when, where, and how to use that limited palette, and that would be Jack Adler and Tatiana Wood. Jack, for 10 years, revolutionized comic book covers. And his interior work was lesser, but fascinating. Tatiana would adapt to the needs of the story. She was very story driven.
Mm-hmm.
So she got it. And I mean, she and I would go over Denny O'Neill's question scripts panel by panel, and that wasn't my idea. That was her idea. She wanted
Did she
to
do
really
interior
understand
colors
it.
on those books?
Right.
Yeah. God, I love the woman, and I love her work. But it is a device. It's not a device that that is easy to exploit or take advantage of. It has to be in service of everything else.
In service of the story.
That's right. Well, it all comes down to that. It all comes down to the story. The characters are the most important part of the story, but they're in service of the story.
Ultimately, yeah. I mean, I was reading at one point when I was coloring. What was I coloring? Maybe it was like Red Hook or something. At some point, I was looking at. Was it Adrian Roy? That's
yes.
On the Outsiders, on Batman the Outsiders. For some reason, and it's very limited. It's very limited in the 64 color palette sense, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I was just like, there was something about the way she colored, and there's Batman, and there's like 5 other characters, and there's a landscape, and figuring all that out. And when you're a kid, you don't notice this stuff. You don't care.
I did, though. I mean, with her, there was something about, and I'll tell you this much. I didn't know that I noticed it, but with her and the work that she did, even though you were with the offset and the newsprint and missing shit, the way that she laid things out was I think that's what was one of the difference makers and what made me a Titans fan.
So you noticed.
And I noticed that it was clear, that it was crisp, that it was rendered in a way that made sense to me.
Right.
Whereas I would pick up a Wonder Woman or something else where it was just all like blotched panel, color in a panel, where there was something more three-dimensional about the way that she did things, even at that point. And Ed points out that she colored more Batman comics.
Oh, really?
She colored, I think 180 Batman comics in a row, or something like that. We had Tony Tolan on the Colors Appreciation Day night that we did live in January, and he was, obviously, if I have him on, I'm going to talk about her.
Of course.
Either that or The Shadow, yeah.
Yeah, well, he listen. Let me tell you, it was difficult to get a word in because Paul was nerding out on every single thing. Paul Mounts was on as well, and he was nerding out on on the way that they did coloring back then. I want to come back to the Kickstarter for a second. And
may I make a quick statement about color?
Yes.
Before we go, when I got to DC in 1976, 80, I had heard Saul Harrison, who was president of the company, but came up through production.
No relation.
Say, color will save it. Some really bad art, unfortunately. He says, color can save this. Color will save it. And being a 26-year-old snot-nosed brat, I thought that was kind of cynical. Now, Sal and Jack Adler created that whole 64 color palette system, or did much to create it, actually. And, they knew their stuff from the ground up. But he's right. Color is as critical an element to storytelling as any other.
Absolutely. And you know what? When Frank Robbins was doing Batman and people were like freaking out, apparently I wasn't around for that. I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And then he drew a Man-Bat story that I feel, maybe you told me this, Mike, that Neil Adams actually colored to show the other colors. This is how you color Frank Robbins on a Batman comic. And it was amazing. It was incredible what he did. And yeah,
Cool.
it's just finding the right color. But at the end of the day, what really saves a comic is the lettering, to be honest.
Well, you got to be able to read it.
Yeah, you got to be able to read it.
Lettering can
You
kill
got
a
to be
comic.
able to read the damn thing. Neil once did an interview where he talked about how much better he was than Frank Robbins on Batman. He did not like, at that moment, Frank's Batman. I know that was just a bad moment for him. I'm a huge Frank Robbins fan.
Frank Robbins is my favorite Batman artist. So
He's my favorite. He's one of my favorite artists. Him and Joe Kubert. But I was working at DC when that happened back in the 70s. So I looked up the sales figures. And in point of fact, Frank's, he did drew 3 issues of Detective or something. And Mark Waid would know.
I think he drew 7, but he wrote a lot more.
Oh yeah, he wrote a hell of a lot more.
Yeah,
but those issues that Frank drew actually outsold Neil's issues by 1 percentage point.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Neil thought so too. I'm sorry?
Did they have Neil Adams covers, those Frank Robbins comics?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wonder.
So.
Because that also helps sell a comic is a cover, of course. So.
Well, Frank, of all of the people who've drawn The Shadow, and that only, you can put them all in Yankee Stadium, and some are still going to be standing. Frank is my favorite because he got the energy. He got the energy.
Yep. I want to come back to the Kickstarter for a second. Let's talk about that, and we got some more stuff to talk about. But so I love this concept. I love this world you're building. This is a Dean Haspiel deep cut. I like that. This is number 2.
Yeah, I like that.
And we're gonna have more of them.
Go ahead. Sorry if you have a question.
Well, I want to talk about. There's a bunch of really cool rewards, for backers. Like
and I kept it simple. I realized that one of the things I learned about Kickstarter,
but you're making, you got there are some high tiers that have some pretty cool stuff in it that I'm excited for you for.
Oh, thank you. I tried to make it like 6 to 8 tiers tops. Sometimes there's 30 tiers of this and that, and I'm like, oh my god,
sure.
I don't understand what's happening anymore on your Kickstarter. And then there's all these
the book.
I just want to give you a comic book at the end of the day, honestly.
That's right. Yeah.
And I love to talk comics like what we're doing. So I would love to consult, and I'd love to meet new artists, whether they're a veteran or a rookie. I love to talk about my work to other people. That's why I like being in the studio. I will always be learning. And maybe by accident I'll be teaching. Who knows? And I have done some of that. I've been a mentor professionally, but yeah, I try to keep it fairly simple to the comic books. The one you might have missed the first time around is in there. There's a little bit of a printout, a pinup type thing situation. Last time my stretch goal was a church key, which is basically a bottle opener and a button and a magnet. This time around, listen, I still would love, I haven't cracked 10K yet. Maybe I will tonight. I would love to get to 15K because really what it's doing is not only did the goal of 6,000 pay for the printer and the shipping and all the work that involved and maybe a little bit of gravy, right? But then at 10K, I can pay a couple months of rent to get by, but 15K will ensure that the next Kickstarter I do will be mostly drawn, if not all drawn, because I'm taking this year, 2023, right now to create something of a library and experiment with this platform, this ecosystem that is Kickstarter, ergo why I'm calling it deep cuts, because you can only get these from me,
Right.
And as I've JHU Comics, Forbidden Planet, all the different comic stores I've gone to and been a patron of, and I wish I could get some of these into the comic shops. In fact, I've given gratis copies of COVID Cop to JHU Comics. I gave it to St. Mark's Comics here in Industry City, Brooklyn. When I was in California, I went to Secret Headquarters in LA, and I gave them some copies gratis. I said, just sell it for the price that I'm charging people who back the comic, you know? And so I just want to see if it does well. Do people respond, you know, as a comic in a comic shop? And eventually I will probably have my own little store online, because at the end of the day, that's kind of where we're all going, aren't we?
Sure.
Captain Company.
Our own store, you know?
Yeah. You mentioned something that I need to jump on. You mentioned mentoring. And as creative people, or people who have labored in the creative fields, as we age, it is more than just a good thing or even a gratifying thing. It's our responsibility. We're priming the pump. And by age, I mean starting at about 35. And I'm serious. That's when you start passing it around. You give it back. You listen to people. You know, you don't audition people. You don't know if that kid is going to become great or is going to become, you know, just become a junkie. I mean, you have no idea, you know?
Right.
But you work with them as you can until and unless they make it impossible during those circumstances. Mentoring in all fields. You got to pass it on. I understand that kids don't like respecting older people. I did when I was a kid. And I think that has a lot to do with my being a comics fan.
Right.
Mentor. Spread it around.
Absolutely. And also, things have changed exponentially, like in terms of publishing, creating. Yeah. I still use pen and paper, man. Like, I still have to scan in my art, and like, yeah, I do use Photoshop to color and letter, even though I used to love hand lettering. But now people are just on their phone or their iPad, and they can do it anywhere. You know, like we already know that, right? But to keep up with, you know, what's happening is also part of mentoring in some ways. It's just to be interested in how are you making things now? But at the end of the day, what I want to impart is just storytelling. I don't care what tool you use.
Right.
How do you convey
it doesn't matter. They're tools.
Yeah, those are just tools. How do you convey a story visually? What are you trying to, you know, say and do? And when I have mentored people or advised, I'm not trying to write it for you. I'm trying to identify what are you trying to say, and if you're not getting clarity, I'm going to ask you how to bring out some clarity. I'm not going to give you. I could give you my thought, and if at the end of the day, we might use my way, right? But I want to pull it out of you, or else you're not learning anything, you know. And that's what I realize.
The most important skill to have when you're mentoring is the skill of listening.
Great.
Because you're not the one who's doing the work.
Terrible at that.
The person you're mentoring is.
Right.
So you got to listen to that person and bring out what's great, and not so much stop what's not great, as much as just keep them from falling off the cliff.
Right.
You know, that's it. You're a safety net.
There's so many times, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this too, where I'll start to ask questions, and it's all in their head, and I'm like, you didn't put that on the paper. You didn't put that anywhere.
Right.
Like what's in your head is great. Now put it out there. You know. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you. It's really cool.
Well, she was talking to you.
I think
he was talking to one of you two, not me. That's for sure.
Oh, I doubt that. But okay.
But yeah, and hopefully, again, my work. How was I? I was explaining to somebody once how if you read Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman, right? They did 12 issues of. That's probably my favorite Superman, to be honest. Not only does it entertain, but it educates. As you are reading it, you are learning how to make comics because it's so good that if you wanted to like enjoy the story for what it is, fantastic, great. Now go back and study it. Oh my God. It's a master class in making comics. You know? Unbelievable.
Let me add one more story to that. Kurtzman and Wood did this story for Mad Comics called Sound Effects. It's a phenomenal story. It's really great. It's hilarious. It's beautifully drawn. It's very, very clever. And by the way, it teaches you a lot about using sound effects.
Mm-hmm.
And people just, they think of the Batman TV show and everything just sort of goes from there. Whoa!
Right.
And I'm gone again. That happens every time.
You're here. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, but can you see me?
We see you. You were stuck for a while, but now you're moving again. So keep on doing it.
I don't see anything here. Okay, I'll play around. You guys do what you do. I'll stop babbling.
You're stuck again, but that's okay. We can
Mike,
hear you great.
Your point, Mike. I think also when something looks easy, there was a difficult road trip to getting to that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So and that's the whole point, is to make it look effortless. Ultimately, because otherwise you're just voguing. If you're like, oh, look how cool I figured. And I was doing that with layouts at some point in my comics. I was like, I wanted you to notice my layout. I'm like, wait, people just want to read a damn comic book, chill out.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a good point. I notice layouts, but you have, it's not, people aren't going to do it unless they're trained to, right? So, I had I forget who I was talking to. I was talking to somebody this weekend. There are people who don't know how to lay out comics. There are people who I've had experiences over the past few years, way more than I ever expected I would have, where I'm opened up to a 2-page, double-page splash page or double-page spread, right? So it's a paneled spread. And I get to the top tier, the middle of the spread, and I don't know that it's a 2-page spread because there's a panel break at the crease, on the top tier,
right?
And I go down to the left.
You go
and
left.
I realize I'm supposed to go up there, and it irritates me to no end. But that's basic. And
suddenly a 15-minute trip is now 45.
Exactly.
Left to right, up to down.
Right. Well, you go, like I said.
Suddenly you've been shot like John F. Kennedy.
Exactly. You're like, I'm upset about it. I'm like, I know how to read comics, for crying out loud.
Right.
I hit the panel, I hit the page break, and I hit an end of a panel. I go down here.
Right.
But
we've been taught.
back in 1969. When nobody but Jim Steranko and me were alive, he came out with the first volume of the history of comics, of which he did two. And he turned a lot of people on to Bernie Krigstein and took apart Bernie's work and showed you how he told that story, that classic why am I blocking on the name of Master Race?
Master Race,
which is an amazing story.
And
Bernard
Krigstein is the Jim Steranko of EC Comics.
I tried to get Jim Steranko to be the Jim Steranko of DC Comics. We cut a deal with Julie Schwartz where he would do like 10 Batman covers.
Wow.
Just do them. And then Julie would get people to do the story around it.
Yeah.
And Julie was actually very excited. It got shit canned by bureaucracy because everything good gets shit canned by bureaucracy. But I am still so disappointed that didn't happen.
So Mike, what is your opinion on that? I love the idea of Julie Schwartz, right, commissioning a cover that has a compelling premise with no writer or artist that has drawn that premise whatsoever, right?
Right.
And then you got to figure out how to at least meet it halfway, right, inside the comic.
Yep.
Are you a champion of that? Do you love that idea?
I love the idea. I think it's a stunt, and therefore you can do it too much, or you
Right.
can do it in the wrong places,
Right.
and it's very easy to screw that up.
Right.
But if you watch yourself, you can have great fun.
Oh yeah.
You know how we did Wasteland? After the first several issues, John Ostrander and I would talk on the phone, and because I had the solicitations, I had to write up the copy for the sales books, and every month I had to list a story and a little bit about what it was about and who the talent was. So John and I would just come up with these story titles and some vague ideas and say, well, that sounds like that'd be great for Bill Loebs or whomever. And we had a wonderful time, did some phenomenal stories based upon, no, let's come up with titles we can sell, story titles we can sell.
That's
But that's
fantastic.
not how you go through life.
No, you don't. But you know what? I had a revelation about a year ago. I was driving in a car, probably to Baltimore Comic-Con with Whitney Matheson, my studio mate. And I was like, Jack Kirby, who I think about all the time, right? I love Jack Kirby. And I was like thinking, I'm always trying to make art. I want to have my voice heard. I need to be seen, right? And then I was thinking, Jack Kirby didn't give a shit about that. You know what he cared about?
Nope.
Selling the next comic book.
Getting paid.
So he was getting paid, and he thought, I'll read the paper. What are people talking about? I'll come up with a story or a character around that headline.
And I can sell it.
That'll be next month's story.
Right.
And I thought, holy shit. And it blew my mind to think, what did Jack Kirby write and draw that was from his heart and that he needed? Here's the one that I had to let out into the world. Probably nothing.
No.
And that's not a detriment. I'm saying he was a working class artist, He
was very working class in terms of his attitude and storytelling.
Right.
But one of the really great things about Jack that I couldn't understand for years, he seemed to be in the mid-'60s the only artist, and keep in mind that there were no young people in the business. They just started coming in around that time, who understood the Beatles, who understood anything about rock and roll, but particularly the Beatles. He got the Beatles. And he's not the type of guy you would think would do that. But you read those comics of that time, and he understood it. He understood their impact on society, and to be a natural like that, pick up the newspaper and you run with it.
Right.
My God. But
amazing.
Then again, he could be my God.
I love that concept. So I have a question though, because I'm questioning it in the fact of what about Bob Haney and Nick Cardy? Did they understand the Beatles?
I love Bob. I'm not sure he understood anything since Ernest Hemingway killed himself.
Okay.
And actually, I mean that. I'll tell you a quick Bob Haney story.
Okay.
Mort Weisinger had just died, and the funeral was going on somewhere in some probably cemetery, someplace where it should. And a few people had gone to that. And the rest of us sort of huddled in, I think it was Denny's office, and just started talking about Mort. None of which we could say at his funeral. So Bob Haney comes in, and he sticks his head in because we're all in that one little room, and he's listening to us. And he says, "Oh, excuse me, I just got here, but did Mort die?" And I said, "Oh, Jesus, Bob, I'm so sorry. Yeah, he died a couple days ago. The funeral's going on right now, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "Oh," and he looks very wistfully, the way that I'm beginning to look when I hear that news. And he goes, "I never liked that son of a bitch." So Bob's my hero, but he didn't get nothing about the culture that of the late 60s.
You know why I'm asking, right? Because he wrote Teen Titans.
Well, yeah, and now Mark Waid is trying to bring his Teen Titans into the 21st century.
By the way, Mark Waid is kicking ass at DC right now.
Oh, I agree with you. It's really an interesting take because You know, he's
read it
going
yet.
with his
I have
childhood
it,
and
but I
taking
haven't
his
read it yet.
love for comics that he developed at that time and making stories about that love. And he's doing it in a contemporary fashion. Not easy.
Although Bob doesn't like his Shazam.
I've only, was it 2 issues?
It's not his fault. It's not his fault. And I had this conversation again with somebody this weekend. But the issue is that Billy shouldn't know. It shouldn't be Billy as Captain Marvel. He's a completely separate. You know, he shouldn't be a kid.
Is he a vegan?
I need to read more than one issue, but I need to read more. But actually, can I say two things
Yes.
that are a little bit off Kickstarter and Billy Dog and old comics? Is Bob, your mustache brings me such pleasure whenever I see any pictures of you. Like, you have gone next level. You understand, right?
So I'm gonna. Someone texted me today. Someone texted me today and asked me how my chin was enjoying its nakedness. But then he said something else. So I'm gonna read this because this actually made my day. Hang on one second here. He said that the beard makes me look wise and cool, and the stash makes me look jolly and full of mirth.
Absolutely, man, and that's what that's what we need. Like if I could grow that mustache, I might try to attempt the same thing. But kudos to you for bringing the world such joy. Honestly,
well, that's true. And what I said at the outset of this particular SquadCast is, you look like the old Esquire guy. You remember the mascot for Esquire magazine? Oh,
I see it with the Monopoly guy myself.
No, there's that. That.
Yeah, there's a bit of that, but you can check out like 1950s and 60s issues of Esquire. I'm sure you got plenty of them lying around.
I had no idea. So Mike, you were part of an era that I am so jealous of, that was so profound, which is First Comics, which will be represented at Baltimore Comic-Con this year through the yearbook. Yep. And I emailed you both the drawing I did that you can show, that I've not shown anyone yet, but you can show up here. And it's not great, and it's really hard to try to draw.
No, I've seen it. First of all, I saw you sent something, and I've seen it because I proofread the yearbook, so I've already seen it, and I love it. I love it. Thank you. Know what? You did exactly what you were supposed to do.
Right? I think so.
I thought so too.
You understood the assignment. You completely understood the assignment. I'll get it up. Hang on. Let me just download it.
But Gene, you were there.
I was there a little bit. I was there a little bit.
Part of that.
In the background.
You were an important part of that.
Well,
and I can go into reasons, but we don't have enough time, and it would take me about a week to explain it.
Well, it was incredible time, and I wish we could recapture that moment, but obviously it's a different time, different era.
It is. But there's a couple of people out there somewhere who's looking at the way the comics field is today and going, we can tweak this into something really interesting. Those people are out there, and I wish them the best.
Yes. Well,
they are our
future. Before, and I, Activate, when 2006, when I co-founded Activate and created that idea, it was the same kind of moment of like, these bunch of comics that are putting up for free online. And you have to come back every week to find out the next, few panels or pages,
There you go.
Yeah, I tried to put as much as I could. I put all my characters in there, as well as all the characters that were being represented this year, including, E-Man.
Absolutely.
And they're all.
This is exactly what I wanted. And we've talked about this. Like, you talked about, mentioned earlier about anthologies. Like, I would love to be able to just have everybody bring all their characters to Munden's Bar and
absolutely
rub shoulders with everybody.
And I know there was a Munden's Bar comic, but you do Munden's Bar as anthology, and somehow there's a crossover, and then you get to tell their tall tales. Why not?
We have been talking about a revival of Munden's Bar well, forever. And occasionally we did some stories, and that's nice. And I would kill to do it again. I'm not sure John can do it. He's not
Let's
doing
do it in
well.
tribute. Let's do it in. Let's do it. Let's
Well,
do it
he's-
with John. Or
He's still
in,
alive, so yeah.
in,
I don't want to. I don't want to write
no,
him
let's
off.
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. You know,
How about
I'd love to. Just
John
I need
Ostrander
somebody else.
presents? How about
yeah,
John?
there you go.
You know, come on.
So
man.
many of the original Wasteland artists, who many of whom were London Bar artists as well,
True.
have approached me, have said, "Why don't we do some Londons?" And I said, "I'd love to." I said, "Well, when you do, call me."
Yep. Yep.
Or
No,
You
you
got the
absolutely,
right- you got the-
absolutely. Dino, I appreciate this. I appreciate what you did here. Is this a physical?
The line art is, I mean, obviously it was colored in Photoshop.
Are you going to donate it to?
You know what?
to the
I'm not
auction?
donating it this year because the last 2 times I donated art, and my art never sells. I don't sell my original art, and when it is for sale, it's
Mhm.
for chump change.
Mhm.
And the last one I did, I remember watching. I had drawn the Red Hook and Black Sad. Black Sad was
That was a few years ago. Sure.
a few, and I think I have always donated, and I don't even go to the auction anymore because it's criminal what happens, at least with my art.
So-
and I'm nothing against Baltimore. I love Baltimore. It's my favorite show. But the actual auction, like my Black Sad went for $40. I should have just bought my own art back, you know. I was like,
So-
what? You know?
So I will tell you this much. I do, as of last year, and I will be doing this year, and this is for anybody who's listening and watching and going to come to Baltimore. The auction, I do the promotion of the art. So I do the introduction of the piece. We talk about it, and I know what you're talking about. I know that there were some things last year that I wish would have gone better. But I'm looking forward to it. Because I've seen a bunch of the art. I mean, I've seen all of it. I don't know what's going to be physical that people have. Some
Right.
things I'm really hoping there are. Like
Right.
I've seen Jose's piece,
Mm.
and I saw it in black and white, and I've seen it. Laura Martin colored it,
Mm.
and
oh,
it is ridiculously good.
Awesome.
It is. He didn't bring. He doesn't have people to bring to it, but he did everybody else, right? Like he did
great.
all of them.
That's great.
And it's going to be a great yearbook. Baltimore's going to be a fantastic time.
and it has this swell piece in it that was written by the guy who used to edit over there
Yeah,
at First Comics.
I preferred that too. There was a couple problems.
Gentlemen,
with
I regret to tell you, I have to bail. We have something of a little family emergency that I have to take care of.
All right.
Well, we're going to.
So,
You go ahead, and I'll close out with Dino. We'll
thank
be-
you.
we're
I
gonna run.
appreciate it, Gene. It's always wonderful.
Always.
Bob, it's
Oh,
always wonderful. Let's talk. Let's get together. Let's have a
Yep.
meal.
I will.
Yes.
Or Gene can just cook us a meal.
I'm a great cook.
That's what I hear.
Preferably shirt on.
All right.
With
Thank you, folks. We'll be back next week.
We will be
Bob
back
will
next
tell
week.
you all about it.
Thanks.
Good to see you, Mike.
All right, Dino, I'm going to let you go as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Go into the comments, and you will see the Kickstarter link. Go ahead and back that. Let's get Dino up to 15 grand or more. Let's go for 25. I don't care. We
That
can
would be
go
amazing.
keep going it. Thanks, Dean, for coming on. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you having this time for us. And everybody go check it out.
Cheers.
much.
Thanks so much, man. Good night now.
Good night. All right, everybody. It's just me. I am here. I'm going to close this out here. I don't know if this works. Does this work? I'm going to try to check out these little things. Anyway, next week we are going to be back. We have a huge fall lineup, some late summer fall lineup for you guys. Next week, Cullen Bunn is going to be here, and I believe we're going to have our buddy Ed Cato on as well, who's going to come and say hi and talk about his experience at San Diego Comic-Con and whatever else he's got going on, because he's one of the busiest men in comics and just in general. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out The Hunger in the Dusk. It is worth every penny. It is going to be a good. I hope really amazing things happen for Willow and Chris Wildgoose on that book. I hope they continue to give us more and more of that. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in. I think we had a pretty good, interesting group of people here tonight, and we will see you next week with Ed Cato and Cullen Bunn. Thanks so much. Bye now.